Okay, hi everyone. I'm really happy to participate in Father Frost Against Putin festival. It's my actually third time participating in the festival. One time I was in Helsinki offline. I don't remember which year it was, maybe 2019. Another time I was online, and right now I'm online back again. I'm really sorry that we couldn't make it offline. I'm very sad about this. I really wanted to join you and to be able to speak with you. But it's hopefully not our last time with this festival, and I will be happy to join sometime soon, maybe with some other event in Helsinki, because honestly, Helsinki is one of my favorite cities on this planet, and I haven't been there for a while. And I really miss my friends there and the city. And so, yeah, big hugs and big support from me. So today we're going to talk about anti-war and anti-Putin activism in exile, Russian anti-war activism in exile. I prefer to say anti-Putin activism because I believe that when we're talking about anti-war activism, it's not enough, because I think anti-war activism should be anti-Putin activism. It shouldn't be other way around. And I'm in exile since 2022. I had to flee Russia after a fabricated terrorism case against me. It was a few weeks after the full-scale invasion in Ukraine, and so in March 2022 I left. Actually, I really wanted to flee to Helsinki, but Finland didn't give me visa, and I'm very offended about this, because I was thinking that if somebody gives me visa, it will be Finland, but no. So I left to Estonia, and now I'm based in Austria, in Vienna, and continuing my activism from here. I'm a part of Feminist anti-war resistance movement, which is one of the largest grassroots Russian civil society movements. We are existing as a network of groups, feminist groups, which are both located inside Russia in different regions and in exile in more than 15 different countries and cities. So a lot of our activists had to flee because of political repression. And whenever they went, they established a local group in that country, in that city, of feminist anti-war resistance to continue our common work. And those of us who stayed inside Russia, they had to go fully underground, fully anonymous, and to be able to continue their work. And even though they're doing this with a very strict security protocols that we have to constantly update, because Secret Service also, updating their tools to hunt us and to track us down. Still, with all of these safety protocols, our activists in Russia are not safe, and they're risking their well-being and their freedom, even their physical safety every day by continuing this work. So I think that also, I don't know how many of you from the audience are from Russia or connected to Russia in any way, or from other countries, or from Finland. But yeah, the main focus of my talk will be to, based on my personal experience and the experience of my collective, to describe why it is so important for Russian activists to continue their work in exile, and why it makes so much sense. So because there has been a lot of speculations on that matter, and I think Russian propaganda machine also is putting a lot of effort into trying to sabotage Russian activism in exile, to trying to sabotage Russian opposition in general. And by opposition, I don't only mean some big established political figures. I believe that grassroots activists are also a part of opposition. NGOs, human rights projects, mutual aid projects, everything that is aiming to, resist authoritarianism, war, and violations of human rights. It's all a part of Russian opposition. So there were a lot of, and there are a lot of fights and conflicts in this sphere. And I think, like I said, I think Russian propaganda machine really puts a lot of fuel into this, trying to disrupt and, set apart the communities that already exist. And at the same time, I believe that Russian propaganda did a lot of work to try to kind of spoil the image of Russian civil society for the outsiders, for the outside viewers, for the foreign viewers, because I think that I personally witnessed how the narrative about the Russian anti-war resistance changed throughout 2022 drastically. For example, when the full-scale invasion started and there were a lot of street protests and thousands of people got arrested, and there were mass demonstrations all over the country. In the West, it was covered very well, and but very soon the narrative completely changed to the statement that like all Russians are, mostly all of the Russians are pro-war. Nobody's doing anything. Russians don't give a fuck about anything. There's no civil society. There's nothing. And I think that Russian propaganda machine was a part of why this happened. So I want to talk about several things today. The strategies of Russian activism in exile, in forced immigration, about the connections between Russian activists in exile and Russian activists inside of Russia, about solidarity with Ukrainian initiatives, about the solidarity coming from Russian initiatives to Ukrainian initiatives, about the integration in different countries, about the obstacles, very serious obstacles that we're facing while trying to integrate and trying to continue our work, and some possible solutions that can be made to go through these obstacles. And I think that there are, of course, the focus of our work in exile, I would say right now, all of us, any oppositional initiatives, is to resist war in Ukraine and Putin's regime. But I think there is also some other bigger topics that should be covered, but they're not being covered as much by the Russian activists and Russian opposition in general. Even though I think covering and like working with these topics can really help us to integrate into, the civil societies outside of our country, and therefore gain more support and more solidarity and reinforce ourselves by the support of our foreign comrades, colleagues, and like-minded people. So what I immediately witnessed when I moved abroad, first of all, I felt like I romanticize a lot, like what's going on in Europe, I guess. Maybe it's just something, of course, I think critically, but still you're coming to Europe and somehow you have a feeling that things are a bit better here in a way, that like human rights work in a certain way, and, somehow it should be not as bad as in our authoritarian regime. But very quickly, this whole pink glasses, they wear off, and you understand that there are a lot of injustice happening there, and even to the extent that you couldn't imagine before you arrived here. And what first surprised me is that how successful the Russian propaganda machine has been towards the Western left. I didn't realize the scale of it before I got into Europe and started talking to a lot of activists and politicians and movements and groups. First of all, there's a huge lack of knowledge about what's going on in Russia. There's a huge lack of knowledge about the history of Russian war in Ukraine. There's a huge lack of knowledge of what happened in 2014, what really happened in Crimea with the annexation of Crimea, what's going on in Russia with political repression. So the knowledge is very surface level, which is a bad thing. The good thing is that the interest is very high. So I believe that there was a huge gap, informational gap between Russian civil society and civil societies of other countries in terms of, sharing information of what's going on. My personal theory why this is like that is because of the language issue, because we don't have enough, in my opinion, speakers, influencers, media who have been talking to the Western audience in their languages for the last certain amount of years. Right now, a lot of independent media from Russia, they have their English versions or some other versions in different languages, but for years we didn't have that. And I think it led us to be, as a civil society, to be a bit isolated from the outside world. So people don't really know enough of what's going on. And with this lack of knowledge, they're building sometimes very weird opinions about what's going on. Also, I witnessed that there's a big problem with anti-militarist movements in the West, in the Europe and in generally outside of Russia, because these people from anti-militarist movement, a lot of activists, and most of the time they are kind of older generation of activists, they have been very harsh and very opinionated in a weird way towards what's happening in Ukraine, towards what's happening in Russia. There has been a lot of romanticizations of Russia. The anti-NATO narrative has been so strong that it completely made people underestimate and, look away from the crimes of Putin's regime. So I had a lot of fights and a lot of, conflicts with Western activists who tried to explain to me, a person who had to flee my own country, that Putin is not the biggest evil, that NATO provoked him into attacking Ukraine and all of this crazy bullshit, which leads to another point and obstacle that I found out is what I call, not only me, I think it's already general term, West-plaining, the problem of West-plaining. We know a term, for example, mansplaining, when men explain to women things that women already know and maybe know better than them. And West-plaining is, I think, when people from Western countries try to explain to people from third world countries or Eastern countries that, like, what's going on in their countries, and treating us like as if we are not capable of, having our own conclusions, opinions, and as if we are not people who actually are experts on the issues of our countries and have first-hand experience, witnessing authoritarianism, war, and repression. So yeah, this combination of like anti-militarist people, West-plaining to Ukrainians and to Russian and to Belarus people what's really going on has been a huge issue. For example, I personally experienced some events that me and Feminist Anti-War Resistance organized being cancelled by after the pressure of anti-militarist activists, because we are supporting the right of Ukraine to resist in a militant way, to resist Russian military aggression with their own military. We support arming of Ukraine, and this had a very resentful reaction from this anti-militarist group, that they put a lot of effort trying to cancel our events in different political activist festivals, leftist festivals. This is a very important thing. These cancellations happened multiple times in like a left sphere, and under the pressure of these anti-militarist people or peace activists, the events of Ukrainian or Russian or Belarus activists were cancelled because organizers said, oh, we don't want any harsh conflicts and this is such a sensitive topic. So the best solutions that we came to is just to cancel your event, the event of the most vulnerable people speaking here. So yeah, that has been weird, and that has been a lot of, it took a lot of work, and it still takes a lot of work to resist this. Also, I think that what I found out that Western left has been consuming a lot of Russian propaganda without even understanding that this is a Russian propaganda. For example, a lot of people has been watching, media, Kremlin media projects like Russia Today, thinking that this is something legit, which blew my mind as well. And I think what the most important part is that it didn't start yesterday. This propaganda work targeting left, targeting people who are not conservative, who are progressive, has been going on for decades. So it has, like, the whole period of time that Putin is in power, Russian propaganda machine has been targeting progressive part of the societies outside of Russia, leftists, and huge budgets were put into this. And we were maybe not, me personally, I wasn't aware of the levels of that, but now we see very bad results of that. And now I think we have to work with that, which is a very difficult task because, after 20 years of work of Russian propaganda, without having even the littlest resource, it's really difficult to deconstruct that, but I think it's still possible. So I think, the most sensitive topic that I have experienced while trying to continue this activism in exile was the issue of arming, the question of arming or not arming the Ukraine, and the clashes between us and our foreign colleagues on this topic. And still, I think there are strategies of how it is possible to manage that. First of all, I think that raising informational awareness really help. And for example, for the last 2 years that I'm personally working as an activist in Austria, and our local group here, with doing informational events, educational events, with participating in local festivals or demonstrations with the topic of the issue of Russia and Russian war in Ukraine, we were able to change opinions of certain groups. And we found out that actually the amount of people who have crazy beliefs, who don't want to hear you, who are westplaining and don't care of your own lived experience, this is a very tiny percentage of people. And actually the majority of people, they're willing to change, they're willing to listen, they're willing to, get new knowledge and critically think about it and change their minds. The issue is that, like, it takes a lot of effort, to educate them, to talk to them, and to hear their weird ass opinions on things. But it's still possible. So besides that, we as Feminist Antiwar Resistance, we are trying to put a lot of spotlight, for example, on the issue of the issue of fascism rising in the world and how it's connected to Putin's regime. We also think that our Western colleagues, maybe not in Finland, I think in Finland people are very aware, but in other countries, people don't realize that clearly that Putin's regime is one of the major driving forces of this international conservative far-right turn that is happening. It's not very visible and it's not very clear to people that Russian government has been financing far-right political parties all over the world, and not only political parties, but even far-right groups like neo-Nazi groups, anti-gender initiative, anti-abortion initiative, anti-LGBTQ plus initiative. A huge amount of budgets from Kremlin is being, contained and shared constantly to support these initiatives worldwide, because Putin is like this, one of the biggest drivers of these so-called traditional values. And in the interest of Putin's regime is to, promote these traditional values, which are anti-women's rights, anti-reproductive rights, anti-queer, anti-anything which is connected to freedom and, personal choice and human rights, to promote it and make these values win in as much countries as possible, because therefore Putin has more governments that are far right. Putin has more allies that are going to support his crimes against Ukraine humanity and in some citizens. So we try to really spread this narrative, to do this agitation, talking about Putin's regime as not only the issue of Ukrainians or Russian people, but as the issue, as a threat to not only to the Europe, but to the whole world, because of how big of a power it is and its ambitions to actually, how do you say, влиять? I don't know what's the word for влиять, influence the political climate in the world and in many different countries. And as an example of this, we try to talk a lot about how so-called Russian laws are being, exported outside of the Russian borders. For example, the famous law against so-called LGBT propaganda that has already been established in several countries in Europe by far-right politicians who are kind of Putin allies, or this law against foreign agents that is being used to, discriminate and make lives harder of NGOs, activists, anybody, journalists who are in the opposition to Putin. So like the same laws are being taken and implemented in different countries by far-right politicians to put pressure on their own civil society. So they're using the tools established in Russia and then implementing them in their own countries. Also, we try to, again, talk about Putin's regime as an authoritarian regime, and again, talk about Putin as this driver of authoritarianism in the world. And another topic that I think, and yeah, why I'm describing all of these points, because I believe that we're not working on these topics enough internationally, and I think it has a really good potential to build international coalitions on the basis of these topics, because the issue of fascism, the issue of far-right conservative turn is the issue that bothers, I think, every one of our allies from the left, anti-authoritarian people, leftist people, progressive people around the world. And I think if we present ourselves as a part of this struggle, if we explain to our allies outside Russia that we are on the front line fighting Putin's regime, therefore we are on the front line fighting authoritarianism and far-right political turns, it will help to build this coalition. It will help to make our foreign colleagues understand why it's important to work closely together with us and resist this whole thing together. Because I believe that we can only succeed if we resist this internationally and if we break through this isolation that is now going on between the Western world and Russian civil society, or even between the Western left and Ukrainian resistance, which is a thing right now. I want to also talk about some of the solutions against that, for example, I experienced in my own activism in Austria, but also I just don't want to talk about other people's experience, but for example, in Feminist Anti-Resistance in different countries, in Germany or in UK or in Baltic countries, our activists are trying to do the same strategies and succeeding in them on the local level. So we're talking about grassroots activism here and cooperating with civil society movements and local activists and local groups. For example, in Austria, the moment I arrived here, I started working closely with local other Russian anti-Putin, anti-war groups. And we have multiple groups here. Some of them are more liberal, some of them are mixed. So we're not talking as generally Russian opposition is very mixed in terms of political views. So is this like oppositional diaspora, to say so, in every country. But I think it's still important to work together and to do some big actions, anti-war, anti-Putin actions together. But at the same time, what I noticed that among these circles of Russian opposition in exile, we're often are inside our own bubble. For example, doing some protests near the embassy, which was a thing in like the first couple of years after the full-scale invasion in Ukraine, doing some events in Russian language. And it was a lot, like there's a lot of this going on. And I felt like there's not enough of integration into the local civil society, because people who are passing by our demos near the embassy, which are happening in Russian language, they can't connect to it because they don't understand the language, they don't understand what's going on. And Russian embassy obviously don't give a fuck what we're doing there, because like it doesn't influence them in any way. And also local governments are very happy and comfortable when the only thing we do as Russians in exile is just standing in front of our Russian government and chanting "Putin, go away," because it's a comfort zone for them. For example, I mean, in Austria, like Austrian government prefers us to stand near the Russian embassy than us standing near the Austrian parliament and chanting about why the fuck Austria has been buying Russian gas for the last decades, while stating themselves as being neutral and anti-war and everything, and at the same time fueling Putin's regime with this gas money that helps to, you know, support war in Ukraine. And same critique can be addressed to many other countries. So we believe that it's really necessary to to go outside of this activist bubble, and also to target local governments and local civil society and find these connections, these problematic criminal connections that local countries still have with Russia. And in my personal opinion, because, okay, I'm anti-war activist, feminist activist, anarchist, but I'm also environmental activist. And for me, the biggest question since 2022 was, why the hell the issue of Russian fossil fuels is not the biggest thing that the Western left is talking about or protesting against. I think the Western left completely failed in addressing this issue, especially considering the fact that Russia is still one of the main providers of gas in Europe, and huge amounts of money is still floating in to the Russian budget from different European countries. And there's this gray fleet that still exports Russian fossil fuels abroad. So like the fossil fuel business has been going. And since the beginning of war, I have been talking about the fact that, you know, this is like the core thing. This is the core intersection that we're having, because we have climate emergency, we have climate crisis. We're generally worldwide, as a left, as a progressive people, are against fossil fuels. And here we have the issue of fossil fuels, the main thing that keeps Putin's regime alive, the main things that helps Putin to finance war in Ukraine. We have it, and we have all of these countries consuming these fossils, but we don't have enough protest against this. We don't have enough collective action against this, which I found crazy. And so we tried to work with started working with different environmental groups, and for example, Fridays for Future, and different movements that are against fossil fuels, trying to bring up this issue of Russia, because we noticed that almost very rarely people in these movements, in these groups, are focusing on the topic of Russian fossils. I don't know how it happened, but this is the thing. And we believe that we should push that, and we should work with this topic. For example, in Vienna in 2023, there was a huge international gas conference where representatives of gas corporations around the world gathered to talk about the future of gas and fossils and everything. And there was a huge international protest and anti-conference against this conference, with activists, environmental activists from different parts of the world, including African countries, including Global South activists, and me, and also another Russian Armenian activist, Fridays for Future activist Arshak Makichan. We decided to join this conference to talk about the topic of Russian fossils and to talk about its connection to Russian military aggression towards Ukraine, and not only Ukraine, to talk about how we can be anti-militarist by not trying to shut the mouths of Ukrainian people who are asking for weapons, but maybe on focusing on the issue of fossils, because fossils are like fossil money are weapon money, basically. From fossil money, Russia is buying weapons from Iran and just building weapons to attack Ukraine. So we were trying, to switch this narrative, to combine these two things, environmental activism, anti-militarism, and saying like, this is the thing you should be focusing on, because this is something practical that you could do, and you trying to shut the mouths of Russian, Ukrainian, Belarus activists is not a productive and counterproductive thing that you're doing, while covering it with peace-washing ideas of, oh, we're against weapons in the world, because we are also against all weapons in the world, but this is unrealistic thing to try to put all of our efforts into, while we can do more practical things, such as, for example, blocking or protesting local companies that are buying Russian fossils in Europe still, or the governments who are doing business as usual with Russia still. So, for example, this conference were in Vienna. This Ghent conference was successfully sabotaged and blocked by activists. And after this conference, after our talk with Arshak about Russian fossils, we built, 15 new connections with different environmental groups who got their first interest and started researching about the Russian fossils, and then started talking about the Russian fossils in the context of war in Ukraine. So, these kind of interventions and trying to come to, to the local events, to the local resistance, to the local struggle with our agenda, it really helps us to expand our influence and to change the minds of the activists. Oh, I'm so tired. No, I'm not tired. I'm feeling weird because I have no idea if you're still there, because I don't hear anything and I don't see anything, but I hope you're still there. So what else? Like where to go, whom to build the connection with? Okay, talking about fossils, yes, we need more connections with environmental movements. Talking about the far right political turn, we tried, for example, again in Austria, I tried to meet every anti-fascist group that exists in Austria. And I think I succeeded after 2 years of banging my head against the closed doors, because also sometimes it's really difficult to make connections with people abroad. They're not very open, especially if we're talking about radical left or anti-fascist people. And but it's possible if you're being persistent. So I think we were also able to build these connections with anti-far right groups, and we did several successful actions together. For example, in Austria, a far right political party won in the elections a year ago, but luckily they were not able to actually take their place in the government because nobody wanted to form a coalition with them. But this only happened because there were huge anti-far protests happening all over the country, and a huge resistance towards this political party, winning, the fact that they won the elections. And important thing is that we were trying to promote while this all was happening in Austria. We were constantly pushing the information that actually this far-right party was able to win the election because they have close ties with Kremlin, and Kremlin wants them to win. And also they're using Russian political technologies and Russian bots and Russian propaganda machine to spread fake news and fake narratives among Austrian civil society to gain supporters. So they're spreading fakes about migrants, about queer people, all of this conservative stuff to make people panic and consume all of these populist views and then vote for them because they present themselves as the savior of all of these horrible things happening. And they are working in close ties with Russia, and they are kind of stealing the elections with the help of these propaganda technology that Russia is like succeeding in. And at the same time, we were talking about their ties like with neo-Nazi groups that are also being supported by Russia. So we were really exposing this Russian track, this Russian trail that this far-right political party has. And the thing is that what we found out that even the local activists who are anti-fascist, even though they're the experts on the topic of their own far right, they're not fully aware of these ties with Russia, and they cannot, they're not aware, they don't know a lot of information that we know. So we were able to, to help them with that, to put a spotlight on that, and to change, to make people protest this election situation. And yeah, I mean, the coalition didn't happen. I'm not saying that the coalition with the far right didn't happen because we are so cool and we make everybody understand that they have close ties with Russia. But this is a little puzzle in the big resistance that was happening. And I think this is important. And also our participation in this protest against local far right helped us gain respect and support and solidarity from the local groups that later supported our cause of, being against war in Ukraine and being against Putin, etc. So we like fossil fuels, the topic that has been underestimated, and I think we should work on that. Also, I believe it's not only our I'm talking about what we as Russian activists can do, but also I'm encouraging our foreign comrades to also, pay attention to that and, work with us on the issue of fossils, on the issue of far right, on the issue of conservative turn, because also, I mean, in Scandinavia, far right groups also have connections and ties to Russia. And this is something that we can work on together to break this isolation that we're having. And also, once again, want to say that Putin's regime, the propaganda machine has been constantly saying that, these activists and politicians in exile, they're worthless, they're clowns, they can do anything, nobody listens to them, they're doing bullshit. And I mean, yeah, a lot of people are doing some questionable things in exile, or politicians saying questionable stuff. But the main thing is that actually Putin's regime doesn't want us to do anything. They want us to seem worthless. They want our people outside of the country to see us as worthless. They want us to lose any faith in ourselves. Actually, they want us to be silent. They don't like that we're being active here. They don't like that we're being listened by other politicians or local activist groups. They don't like that we're disrupting their cute, little, comfortable pro-Russian propaganda that they have been establishing for the last 20 years. They don't like that. It is actually a threat for them. That's why they try to underestimate us and to make us look worthless. I want to make a very interesting example. Another thing that we're trying to do is we are trying to get into the local political or activist festivals as much as possible in different countries where we are. Because, for example, there are a lot of festivals and activist events that Russian opposition is organizing or Russian activists are organizing in exile, but they're only about the issue of Russia and Ukraine. But there are so many local political and activist festivals. And I think our job as Russian activists to go there, not to wait for the invitation, but to monitor these festivals, to monitor these political events. I don't care what it is, political festival, big demonstration, or any type of big event where different groups, movements are represented, just to go there, to apply there with our agenda. That's what we have been doing here. And I think it's really important. And for example, in last September in Vienna, every year, it's happening like every year, late August, early September. It's like the biggest festival of the left. I would say there are leftist political parties represented there, also NGOs, human rights organizations, also radical left and anti-authoritarian grassroots movements like feminist groups, anti-fascist groups, queer organizations, like everybody, like this whole spectrum of the left is represented on this festival. And this festival looks like a huge festival in the park. where you have music, food, and hundreds of these shatri, how do you say, tents. So every group or party have a little tent where they can do little events there, sell their merchandise there, spread leaflets and certain information, gain donations. It covers the whole big park. And this year we decided to apply there as like a Russian grassroots anti-Putin, anti-war activists. So we as Feminist Anti-War Resistance gathered with 2 other Russian anti-war groups, and we decided to unite as a coalition to be presented on this festival and to talk about, to fundraise for Russian political prisoners, Russian leftist political prisoners specifically, to spread information how to support Russian queer organization, and to also spread leaflets against the war and why it's important to support our comrades in Ukraine. And we also made a huge stand there, informational stand with photos and texts, which was called, I don't remember how, but so this stand was showing specifically the connections between Austrian far-right and neo-Nazi and Kremlin and Putin's regime. And this stand, it was like 2 meters, 2 square meters. And there was a lot of pictures, a lot of short text, and you could track all of these weird connections that Austria has with Russia till today. Many people gathered around this informational stand. Many people were taking pictures about this because this is a very hot topic, because this is still happening. Also, the issue of Russian espionage in Austria and in this region of Europe is huge. So we just exposed that. All of this information, nothing secret, everything you can find online. So we were not doing some, big surprise kind of thing. What do you think happened? The first night of the festival, and the festival goes on for the whole weekend. The first night of the festival, this stand was vandalized. So somebody came in the night and tore it all apart. And our stand, among 200 of stands and tents, we were the only ones whose stand got vandalized. And I think this kind of thing, this kind of situation really proves that what we're doing really hits the nerves and makes sense there. Because I 100% sure that it was some people connected to the embassy, or people from the embassy, or some pro-Russian far-right Austrian people who specifically came to tear this information apart. But the good thing is that we actually were not sad when this happened, because we realized, okay, you tore apart our stands. Now everybody is going to know about this, because we are going to make such a huge scandal out of this. So it will be even bigger than before. And what we did, of course, we made posts about this. We wrote to every group, to the organizers of the fest. Everybody was shocked and said, like, oh my God, somebody ruined the tent in the night. It was a huge, it brought so much attention to us that the next day there was a line of people standing next to our tent, trying to talk to us, to get our leaflets, to donate to Russian prisoners. And also the next morning we printed the same information and put it back. And after, also some activists came to this tent and started writing some messages of support, anti-fascist messages near our informational stand. So this actually works, and this actually something that, proves that what we're doing makes sense, because they don't want us to do this kind of work, which means that we need to do it. Another thing is that, wait a second, there's another thing that Russian propaganda tries to force, is this kind of break, and how do you say, razryv? I don't know, you tell each other what this word means. So this kind of distance between Russian activists who are in exile and those who are staying in Russia. So Russian propaganda, I think, reinforces the idea that there's no connection, that the connection is lost, that people who went outside of Russia, they completely lost any idea of what's going on in Russia. And people who went outside hate people who stayed, and people who stayed hate those who went outside of the country. I am 100% sure that Kremlin reinforces this narrative, because every collective, every NGO, every activist movement that I know of, Russian activist movement, everyone has in its team people who are on both sides of the borders. I don't know any like prominent group or collective or movement that only has people who are in exile. Everybody has people, I mean, probably maybe there are some, but I don't know them. I think all of the prominent people, they have, all of the prominent collectives, they have people who are working underground in Russia, who are working in very severe conditions. Also in feminist anti-war resistance, it is like that. Also in our like decision-making process, it can be like no decisions are being made without the participation of those of us who are staying inside the country. So this synchronization is a crucial thing for Russian civil society. And I think it's a partly a myth that there's like no connection, because people are connected every day and working every day through chats, through secret calls and everything. But at the same time, I think it's, I mean, this kind, even though people are working together every day, somehow there's like a lot of tension, a lot of frustration, a lot of like mental breakdown situation where people are actually kind of becoming a victim of this narrative that like we need to hate each other and we have nothing in common anymore since we're separated by this border. So people are really starting fighting because they're like psychologically finding this as an easy way to let their frustration out and let their, you know, anger out just like on each other. But honestly, I think it also has been a very successful myth that worked for the Western comrades, because I always ask the question, like, but how do you, when was the last time you talked to somebody from Russia? What do you think like a Russian activist would say about this like action or project that you did? And like my reply, actually, like Russian activists who are in Russia are a part of this project. They are building this project. They are involved in all of this. They just can't talk to you because it's not safe for them. That's why I'm talking to you right now. But it doesn't mean that I'm doing something with other people completely detached from the people who are in Russia right now. So yeah, and I think there are also, like, since the connection is still possible, there's still a lot of tools that we can use to not only talk to and be in touch with activists that are staying in Russia and work with us, but also to, you know, stay in contact and synced with Russian civil society. For example, in Feminist Anti-War Resistance, we're doing a lot of anonymous polls, and we have our anonymous bots in and polls that we use to, and anonymous chats, for example, in Element, where people from Russia can anonymously and safely join and share their opinions of what they want us to do, what are the issues that matter the most for them, so we can, you know, be synced in terms of where are we going as a movement. How much time do we have left? Because I'm almost done, but I also want to leave some time for questions.
Well, we started late, so I think we can have like 15 minutes extra.
Okay. So what else? Yeah, I think also as a solution, yes, I already said that, like, it's important for us to integrate in this festivals, event, demonstrations. For example, right now, like 2 years ago in Vienna, nobody knew me and I knew nobody. And then I started like just going everywhere, because like I think most important advice from me to Russian activists in exile is not to wait till somebody is going to acknowledge you or invite you somebody, because they won't. They, like, it's really not working. I know it's hard and I know it's frustrating and I know it's really draining, but to gain solidarity, to gain support, to build these networks, we need to go to our Western foreign comrades and to put ourselves out there, to make these connections, to really push them to invite us somewhere, to really, you know, try to go there with our agenda. And also, I think it's very important to stand in solidarity with Ukrainian Ukrainian comrades, because most of the times, our foreign colleagues, they also forget to invite or consider the opinions of Ukrainian activists in their political events. And, there has been millions of events on the topics of Russia-Ukraine war happening in Europe without participation of any of Ukrainian activists or Russian activists. So we are also trying to, educate them that this is not okay to do something about the people who are directly affected by the war without their participation. And somehow they are forgetting about this. And what really supported me is in this kind of integration process. I talked to Kurdish activists a lot during the last couple of years, and some of them told me the stories how it took decades for them to convince European left and Western left to stand in solidarity with them. So we know now, that in the left, solidarity with Kurdish movement in Europe is huge among the left. Everybody, it's like a baseline thing to be standing in solidarity with Kurdish people and with Kurdish resistance. But it didn't happen in 2 or 3 or 4 years. They spent decades to really convince. And they told me, older activists told me, that it was the same kind of thing, that they had to come to comrades around the world to really push this, to really, push this information to them and explain to them why it is important to support us, why it's important to learn about what's going on, how to support us, how to break through the propaganda narratives, what is the real information, what is the real knowledge about what's going on. And we are very, we didn't have the decades of doing this work, and I think we have decades of this work ahead of us. The problem is that we don't have enough time because everything is escalating very quickly. But still, I believe that we have to do this agitation, and we have to do this educational work, and we only can do it ourselves because nobody is going to invite us. We need to push through. So the last thing that I wanted to say was that I see that a big problem that we have as Russian activists, that we don't have in Russian opposition, that we don't have enough of online content makers who are talking about what's going on, in Russia, like our opinions about the war in Ukraine, Putin's regime, the crimes of Putin's regime, from us as people who firsthand experiencing this in other languages. So, for example, again, talking about Kurdish activists or Ukrainian activists or Afghan activists or Palestinian activists, they have many bloggers, influencers, YouTubers, Instagram bloggers, TikTokers who are speaking English or German talking about these issues. And many people learn about what's going on and learning how to, define right from wrong, propaganda from real information from these bloggers and these content creators. And I think somehow in Russian opposition, we have almost no one who does this content in other languages. We don't have any super big names. If you know some big names, please tell me in the Q&A session. But it's incompatible. The amount of these people is incompatible to what all the other people in different countries, civil societies are having. So I think this isolation is also the reason of this isolation is that we don't have this tool of connecting to the outside world through social media in different languages. And there are a lot of good articles written by Russian authors on all of this issue, Putin's regime, repressions, war, political prisoners. But articles are not enough because most of the people are not reading articles right now. But most people are okay with watching Instagram Reels or TikTok or a YouTube video, but we don't have enough of content like that. And actually, I was very interested to listen to Nika and inspired to listen to Nika previous lecture about YouTube as the tool of resistance. I think we should have more YouTube channels in English, German, any kind of languages about what's happening in Russia, anti-Putin, anti-war, anti-authoritarian content to reach out to the world. I don't think everybody has to become, I don't know, Russian Hassan Piker or something. I completely agree with Nika. If even 10 people watch your content, it's more than enough. We just have like such a lack of it. And from what I hear from activists abroad, people want this content. They want to learn things like this. Every time I'm speaking somewhere, every time people tell me like, oh, I didn't know about this, I didn't know about that, I had no idea if this is going on. So there's a huge potential for this content, but nobody is producing it. So I really encourage you to follow Nika's guidance and start creating your small little YouTube channels or something if you are into that. So yeah, but I think it is a big part of the problem that we don't have enough of that. And I think we can now maybe go to the questions and continue this with questions, because I think I ran out of my notes. Also, did you see what I wrote, made a picture? I want to have a hat with this print.
Yeah, okay. So, yeah, if you have questions in English, can you come more closer to this microphone? And if you have questions если будут вопросы на русском, то ближе к этому микрофону тогда. То есть, кто хочет спрашивать что-нибудь или просто высказаться? Who would like to ask?
Скажите что-нибудь.
Вот это на английском, вот это на русском. Не надо так близко, вот это нормально.
Okay. I just would like to ask, you have noticed that it's very important to make some impact on governments in Europe, and especially about this missiles treatment and about consuming Russian gas and oil. And I would just like to ask, what do you think, what if we will start doing it, like really, and if it will be impressive way? Don't you think that they will just start fighting with us with refugees and asylum seekers? Because, for example, in Finland already they, as I can understand, they have already accepted the law that if you was involved in some extremist society, you will never get citizenship, for example, and you will have problem with other status maybe. And I know one guy who has burned, for example, Russian flag on Independence Day a couple of years ago, and now he has big problem with SUPA, it's analog of FSB in Russia, and they create lots of problem for him because they tell that he is kind of provocator or something like that, you know. And I would like to ask, what do you think if we will really start this agenda against these policies with oil consuming from Russia? Don't it will it cause some problems for refugees or even for this institution as political refugee status? Maybe they will just start fighting with this, and we already see that, for example, from US they are just sending people back to Russia, and they are coming into the prison very often. At least we already have 4 cases, I guess. So thanks.
Yes, I totally agree that there are risks, because we are, you know, most of us don't have problems with documents or with status, or I mean, yes, and far right conservative turn. And also Nika mentioned that like it's not safe to be a leftist activist, anti-authoritarian activist, anti-right activist right now because of this turn and these tendencies. I personally faced political repression in Austria this July. Can you imagine that? If somebody told me this like 2 years ago, that I'm going to be busted by police in Austria, I wouldn't believe that, but that's what happened. I was participating in Antifa camp, anti-fascist youth camp in Austria this summer. And I actually organized there an event for solidarity collectives for our Ukrainian comrades and for anarchist Black Cross, in support of anarchist Black Cross in Belarus. And this anti-fascist camp was raided by Austrian police after the reports. And it happened with the involvement of far right, because there's a rise of far right in Austria. So, but I mean, this was political repression, and it made me feel scared for my status in Austria, because they wanted to present us as some extremists gathering or something. And I think this all makes sense. I'm also trying to be, you know, for example, I'm feeling a bit more safe. I don't know if it's like I'm being delusional, or it makes sense. I'm feeling more safe because I am, how do you say, medijna aktivistka. I have I'm not an anonymous activist. I'm an activist with a big background already, so people know me. I have my blog. So like, if somebody is trying to deport me or, you know, arrest me, I think it will be a big scandal in media, because I already gained some influence or some, I don't know how to, but you know what I mean. I think it's easy to kick me out for some activism out of the country if I was not known by anybody. But at the same time, I also understand that certain things can be very dangerous to do not anonymously. But I think there are ways still to do that. For example, if you want to get involved with this like anti-fossil kind of activism, but you don't want to be, you know, you don't need to be on the front line of this. For example, you can meet people from environmental activist groups, local groups, and educate them, and share your ideas with them, and ask them to do demos, ask them to do protest actions, you know, to just help them with information, help them with their lack of knowledge, and tell them directly that you are not able to be on the front line of this resistance, because you can lose your residency permit or refugee status, or get in trouble with the Secret Service in your country. But they, with their local passports, can do this for you. You are just like kind of helping them out. This is what we have been doing actually in some countries as Feminist Anti-War Resistance. Just, you know, helping movements and activists to find the right spot where they need to address the issues, to hit, to target, but without us risking our safety to do that. Because something that is very risky for us is not that risky for the citizens of its country. Because, okay, maybe they can be charged for a certain demo with a fine, but they are not going to be tortured at the police station, and they're not going to be deprived from their passport for this. So I think this kind of underground communication and cooperation is a way to protect yourself, even though nothing is safe, of course. But I see that it can be manageable to talk with them. We had a lot of private meetings. In Austria, we have a lot of private meetings with groups, just to share knowledge and information and our ideas. What can we do together? Not publicly. I think it's a really good thing to do. So yeah, if I answered your question, hope it answered it a bit. Спросите еще что-нибудь. Скажите что-нибудь.
So, any more? There is one.
I agree almost with everything with you. I think you were like awesome. Also, like, can you be followed in social media? Because it will be interesting.
Me?
Yeah.
Yes, of course.
Also, I think like Nadia Tolokonikova from Pussy Riot has been really big in social media. I've been following her for many years. I think she's been doing really great work. And then I recommend to you, because you're in Vienna, in YouTube, they have this like series on Jan Marsalek, how he became the biggest Russia operative, a Russia agent in Europe. It's totally fascinating. Like, it's so detailed. I recommend it. You probably know about the guy.
Yes, thank you. I know Jan Marsalek. Jan Marsalek is one of my biggest enemies now. I learned everything about him.
It's like started like how he was like a little kid and how he developed to become like the biggest Russia agent in Europe almost. So
yes. He's on my list of enemies, like top 10 right now. But you can follow me. I still have Instagram and Twitter and like all of the social media, because I have been a social media person for a while. So I'm not an anonymous activist. I'm very kind of public, and it's too late to be anonymous for me now. So I'm using this, presence in social media to do this work.
Yeah. More comments or questions? I would like to. People are getting tired after 6 hours. So.
Yeah, I think we all should go and have some rest and a drink. And karelski pirozhok.
Just one comment to the question made before, like if you would like to be a visible activist in Western country and you are afraid of your safety, so it's a good idea to have allies also a bit in higher status. So there are, for example, many politicians, many parliamentarians that could be your security. If you know some parliamentarians in your country, if you get into the trouble, they could speak for you. Then could be easy. Fix your background.